Welcome to my kitchen. Today's recipe is tomato, beans, and feta salad. It's a great addition to your summer salad rotation. It's easy, affordable, and really healthy. Today we're going to start out with some canned beans that have been rinsed and drained. You can use any beans you want, but I decided to use black beans and white beans today. And that's a 15-ounce can of each. Like I said, you do want to make sure that they're rinsed and drained. The starchy liquid that they're in sometimes can make them a little bit difficult to digest. So if you rinse them off really good, then they're not as rough on your belly. And then we're going to move on to the tomatoes. I'm going to use grape tomatoes today. They're a little bit sweeter and they're just the right size. And I do like to cut them in half because when you do that, it lets the juice out of them and it helps make a little bit more dressing. You want to make sure you wash them off. Just run them under some cool water. Swish them around in the colander a little bit. You can also use different kind of tomatoes if you'd like. You can use a plum tomato or a beefsteak tomato. I would make sure that they're not overly ripe so it doesn't get mushy. But those tomatoes have a lot of meat to them. They're not all juice or seeds. And I think they'll stand up in this recipe pretty well. I used a pint box of grape tomatoes, and this one was marked medley, and I think that just means that it's different sizes and different colors, but they are all grape tomatoes. Like I said, if you wanted to use a plum tomato or a beefsteak tomato, I think they would work out really well. You just might want to cut the pieces a little bit bigger. If you wanted to have a little bit of a meatier texture to this, a little bit heartier salad, you could use less tomatoes. And then if you wanted to stretch it out so it lasts a little bit longer, you could add some more tomatoes. This is a nice recipe because it is very forgiving. You can really change things up in it. We're going to move on to the onions. This is a sweet onion, and that is all that I use because I find that it makes me cry a lot less. And I prefer the sweetness. They're not such a strong onion. If you wanted to, you could change that up too. You could use some scallions or maybe some red onions. That would be good in there. And if you don't want to use onions at all and you still want a little bit of that onion flavor, you could use some fresh chives. Like a tablespoon would probably be good. Just chop it up nice and fine. But I am using a regular sweet onion. And I'm using about 1/4 cup of nice thin slices. And this is where it helps if you have a really sharp knife. It makes it a lot easier to get the slices nice and thin. You don't want them too small. But you want them about the same size as the tomatoes. And next is the lemon, and it's 1 lemon, and you're going to zest it. So you might want to give it a wash first. Just run it under some cool water for a minute. You want to be careful when you're zesting. Watch your fingers. And you want to run the lemon all the way down the rasp and sort of turn it when you're doing that. It'll help just get the yellow part, which is where the most of the flavor is. You don't want any of that white part. And we are going to use the whole lemon. And if you squeeze it with the cut side up, it stops the seeds from falling into the bowl. And keep your eye on them. And you want about 1/4 cup of lemon juice. If your lemon's not real juicy, you can definitely cut another one and get enough out of there to get 1/4 cup. And then the salt and pepper. That's 1/2 teaspoon of each. You can put a little less in if you'd like, and then give it a try when everything else is in there. Feta cheese can be a little bit salty, so you might want to give that a try. And we'll give it a good stir here. And get some oil on it so the dressing can start forming. And then we're going to move on to the feta cheese. And this I'm just going to slice into about pea-sized pieces. And I like to do it this way because if you crumble it, sometimes the pieces get really small, and then when you mix them in, they get even smaller. You want to have a nice bite of cheese when you eat this. You want to really taste the cheese. So I cut it up and I put it in after I've stirred it a little bit. Because when you stir from now on, you want to be really gentle with it. So get this cut up. Toss that in the bowl. And then we're going to use the basil. And this basil is from my garden. It's growing quite quickly. I think it might be pesto time pretty soon. And we're going to give that a nice chop. And I'm going to make smaller pieces of that. I don't want big mouthfuls of basil in this salad. You don't want it to be overwhelming. If you're not crazy about basil, you can put a little bit less in. This is about 2 tablespoons of basil. Get that in there. And then we're going to very gently stir in the cheese and stir up the dressing. You're more going to fold it than you are going to stir it. You sort of just want to take it and fold it over. You don't want that cheese to break up too much. And then you want to give it a try. This is where you're going to taste to see if you want a little bit more salt, a little more pepper, a little more oil. And I did find that I wanted just a little bit more salt and a little bit more oil to have a little bit more of the dressing in there. So I said, this is a nice recipe because you can swap things out. You can little less, little more, whatever you like. And I like to store this in a glass container in the refrigerator. It lasts quite a while. If you want this to be just a little bit more extra, you could put some olives and salami in here and have a whole meal out of just this one dish. I hope you enjoyed watching, and I hope you give this a try. Let me know how it goes. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next recipe.